Yes, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has been handed new powers to block migrant boats using Italy's navy.
The Italian cabinet has approved a bill which will authorise naval blockades during periods of what it calls exceptional pressure at the country's borders.
Well, the move marks a further tightening of Italy's crackdown on illegal migrant arrivals. So should Britain do the same to tackle the small boats crisis in the Channel?
Well, that's a question that people ask almost every day when we talk about the small boats. We're joined now by journalist David Shipley and political commentator Samuel Sweek. David, how would it work if we did it?
Well, it would be a lot easier than people think. I mean, what most people aren't aware of is that we are actually currently intercepting almost all of these small boats. That's how we know exactly how many are arriving, because we intercept them and then escort them to the English coast. And then the migrants are put on buses and taken to hotels or HMOs. So we actually are already doing the intercepting. I think the difference would be, instead of bringing them to the country, where we have all the problems around cost, around crime, around social disruption, we could then put them somewhere more secure where they are not allowed to sort of wander around our towns and villages. And instead, we can move to deport them more quickly. So it'd actually be, if we wanted to do it, and if we had the will, relatively easy.
So why aren't we doing it?
I think it's a lack of will. We have a kind of political class who are stuck in this cage of their own making, where they feel unwilling to change the rules. So they invent this stuff like the one-in, one-out scheme with France, where we spend a huge amount of effort to occasionally send back a few dozen people to France, and then occasionally take some more people back from France. And it does nothing. It doesn't really stop the problem. The reason all these migrants come here is because there are so many pull factors. They know they will get accommodated. They will get money. They will almost certainly be given asylum. Even if they aren't, they probably won't get deported. And actually, to solve that, we do need to start changing the rules. We need to leave the Refugee Convention. We need to,
Yes, but the point is, we're talking about using the Royal Navy.
Yeah.
Which we don't do at the moment. You don't think it's a good idea, Samuel?
Well, not only do I think it's a terrible idea, it's also a fundamentally unworkable, certainly in the English Channel idea, the busiest shipping lane in the whole world. I think what we need to look at also is that complete lack of detail in the Italian Prime Minister's proposals. There is no level of costing. There is a very, very flimsy and vague sort of like description of when the Navy could actually be applied. It just seems to me like another reactionary headline-grabbing policy that actually has very little substance to it, in the same way that we see with President Trump in the United States and Javier Milei in Argentina. It's right-wing reactionary leaders trying to build a big, headline-grabbing proposal that there is very little beneath it.
Well, it can work differently in the waters in the Mediterranean off Italy, because Italy has agreements with the likes of Libya, where they can pick up these migrants and return them to a country like Libya. We don't have that same agreement with France, obviously. Would you envisage that if we were to get as robust as picking them up and trying to land them back in France, for instance, that we'd be seeing some almighty row with not just France but the EU?
Well, I mean, no doubt there needs to be a joined-up sort of strategy in terms of stopping small boats. But what we need to also look at is fundamentally this policy, even if it was brought in, does not actually tackle the root causes of people trying to cross the English Channel.
Grant asylum. The root cause is that we allow people to come here and live here, and then the result of that, we have a migrant crime wave. We have a huge cost of asylum system. The average asylum seeker will cost about €400,000 over their time in the UK, which is the entire tax contribution of one median British taxpayer.
What I'm referring to is first the geopolitical circumstances, but also in terms of tackling. But it's not. So in terms of tackling trafficking, this does nothing. If we put people back where they came from, they will just find another way. The gangs are not being undercut. There is still huge financial incentive, and people will find a way. It's within human nature to be inventive like this. So what we actually need to be looking at is to look at a way to actually undercut the gangs. We don't need headlines, we need action to keep people safe fundamentally, but also address any sort of concern that people in this country do have.
Well, I do agree with you on that, Samuel. They will find a way, unless France actually decides to do something that probably is in the best interest of its own long-suffering populations along the northern shores of France, in towns like Calais and Dunkirk, who put up with these migrant camps week after week, the criminality that follows the mass sort of housing of people in these areas, and actually agree to just take migrants back. They could fix this problem within a week or two if the migrants were told and the people smugglers were told that you go across the channel, you'll be immediately returned back to France. Don't waste your time, don't waste your money.
I mean, respectfully to that, I don't think that being told no is going to stop people smugglers.
But it does stop people. So we know from Germany...
People smugglers are going to still be operating.
Not if there's no business model, Samuel. Why would you pay thousands of pounds to a people smuggler if the trip is going to be a 4-hour trip out in the middle of the channel, only to be put on a boat and landed back on the north?
The thing is that people are being heavily exploited and often entered into criminality and abused in
and we can
hideous
solve
ways.
All that by leaving the Refugee Convention and no longer providing this asylum system. That creates the market. So if you really care about those people who are being trafficked and you care about the safety of British people, you would say we should leave the Refugee Convention and stop accepting these asylum systems.
Bonkers to say that you can care more about refugees by leaving a convention that is put in place.
You have just identified it's creating victims, and further, we have a crime wave.
Not at all. I think politicians like Meloni, politicians like Keir Starmer and others, and people who are following these models are ones who are causing the problems. We have had government after government after government try to tackle this. Nothing has happened to actually fundamentally stop.
We've never tried the Royal Navy in the Channel.
We've never tried the Royal Navy in the Channel. We've never tried leaving the Refugee Convention, accepting it's outdated.
I am so sorry. This is so frustrating because it's such an amazing subject that I know people at home are going to be screaming at their televisions. We just don't.
There's nothing more important than keeping you and your loved ones safe online. With so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. And with their Valentine's Day sale, this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GBNews viewers. It's the easiest way to stay safe online, protect your money, and save big for less than £2 a month. Click the link in the video's description or scan the QR code today.
Joining us now is former NATO commander Rear Admiral Chris Parry. I mean, I think to lots of our viewers, this sounds like a sensible idea to tackle the problem of small boats coming to British shores. Could it possibly work here in the UK?
Yes, of course it could work, and the Navy is equipped to do it. All it takes is the political will to implement it.
And Chris, why then do you think there has been such a significant split? Because we're seeing now more EU rules on deporting asylum seekers to safe third countries. Italy is improving its relations with Albania on that move. It seems that as Britain cuts Rwanda and goes in one direction, the rest of Europe is in a sense waking up and going the other way.
Charlie, for the last 10 years, I've been putting forward a strategy for dealing with the situation in the Channel. On each occasion, it's been stalled by the Home Office, and I'm afraid people say it can't be done. There's all sorts of technical reasons why you can't do it. It's just excuses. We can deal with this problem just as we can deal with any other problem in the Channel. It just needs a good strategy, it needs good leadership, and it needs the political will to be able to do it. All those are lacking at the moment.
You say it's just excuses, but in Italy, has this Albania plan actually worked? Because it's controversial over there. Some people say it's actually not very efficient, it's not very cost effective, the same arguments that were used about Rwanda. I know that under Meloni, the number of small boat migrants has come down, but critics say that's because of a range of other factors, including things like the weather, not actually the policies that she's implementing. Is she really that successful over in Italy, and would a model like hers genuinely work here?
No, it wouldn't. And Olivia, you put your finger on it. You've just mentioned one aspect of what should constitute a strategy. The fact of life is people are trying to pin the tail on the donkey, not recognising it's actually a rhinoceros. And unless you have a strategy that deals with every aspect of what you're trying to achieve, every time you pinprick at it, you're going to see failure. I mean, the first thing we should do, for example, in the Channel is declare a humanitarian crisis, then that enables you to get round all sorts of protocols and rules in relation to what you're trying to do. That hasn't been tried yet. If this were happening on land, the United Nations would be all over it. It would be a humanitarian crisis. But because it's at sea, nobody has the imagination or indeed the intellect to be able to deal with it.
Of course, Chris, the UN Convention of the Law at Sea says that anyone who's lost or who is in crisis in the sea has to be rescued, and the French don't let us return anyone to their shores. So, as you say, there's no cohesive and widespread strategy to make this work, whereas perhaps what Italy's got is better arrangements with Libya for these pushbacks in some cases, but also those third country alternatives. We've got neither of those options at the moment, so we are in a much weaker position.
Yeah, again, you mentioned the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. I don't want to mention it on here because it's part of a program that I'm trying to develop. But we employ lawyers with our government to find ways in which we can use the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea to our advantage, not to stop us doing something. The last thing I want to hear from a lawyer, whether it's a government or one I'm employing personally, is the word but. I want him, because I'm paying him or her, to tell me how I can do things. Again, it's all about excuses. We can stop this in the Channel tomorrow if we choose to, and if we implement a coherent strategy. It's as simple as that. It involves the French, of course it does, but also it means putting some pressure on the French in other ways, rather than just trying to incentivize them by paying them virtually to do nothing.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. That was Rear Admiral Chris Parry.